Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. US President Donald Trump has expressed a strong frustration with Russian President Vladimir Putin and has threatened to impose secondary tariffs of 25% to 50% on buyers of Russian oil if Moscow obstructs efforts to end the war in Ukraine. This outburst came after Putin suggested that Ukrainian President Zelensky be replaced with a temporary administration to allow for new elections. As Trump prepares to speak with Putin this week, we analyse the potential implications of this move with Reuben F. Johnson, a military expert from the Casimir Pulaski Foundation. Mr. Johnson, welcome to TVP World and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me, sir.
Pleasure. So let's start with what President Trump said about Vladimir Putin. He clearly feels that Putin is dragging his heels, by asking for this temporary administration. How do you assess President Trump's response to this?
Well, President Trump is frustrated because he wants a deal, and he wants a deal quickly, and he's not a very patient man, but he's also a very vindictive man, and he's getting the very real impression that Putin is toying with him, that Putin is trying to probe and see how much he can get out of the American administration. And of course, Putin operates always on this basis of he wants to win without fighting. So, of course, he'll ask for a pliable pro-Russian government to be installed in Kiev so he can do what he wants. And Trump has not reacted very favorably to this. He's used some very strong language. He says he's very angry, he's pissed off, and he's talking about these tariffs. And these tariffs, I just want to add this is a lot more serious than it seems, because talking to some people over the weekend about this who are familiar with the whole process of tariffs on Russia and sanctions and what's happened in the past, this is not just sanctions on secondary sanctions on buyers of Russian oil. This is secondary sanctions and tariffs, or secondary tariffs rather, on any products that are made from that oil. And I just for fun pulled up a list. There's 160 different products that we use in our lives every day, which are made from petroleum products. And it's all sorts of things. It's house paints, it's heart valves, it's hearing aids, eyeglasses, nylon rope, all sorts of items that you use every day in your life that you'd never think are any way related to the petroleum industry, but they are. And all those products come from places like China. So it could have a very serious impact, not just on the Russians, but also on Xi Jinping.
And of course, the Indians, who are large buyers of Russian oil. However, President Trump did go on to say that he certainly sounded optimistic. He said that he and Putin had a good relationship, and things would probably get better. Do you think President Trump has underestimated Putin throughout this conversation?
I think he's underestimated the degree to which Putin would prevaricate, maneuver, engage in all sorts of unsavory activity, because Putin always thinks he can outsmart the other person on the other side of the table. I think he's underestimated that. I think he's also underestimated the fact, I think as many people do, that by all appearances, Putin lives in an alternate universe, in his own world, where he simply doesn't I look at so many decisions that are being made, and I talk to people, longtime colleagues of mine in Russia, people who know Russia well, and he makes decisions all the time that are almost, at times, almost as unbalanced and irrational as these films you see of Adolf Hitler in the bunker giving orders to non-existent armies. There's really an element there now where he doesn't realize the true situation inside of his country.
Yes, well, that is somewhat concerning, is it not? Now, just going back to tariffs for just 1 second, 25 to 50% tariffs on oil and, of course, the derivatives of oil. The challenge would be, though, wouldn't it, to enforce such a tariff? I mean, how do you identify what is actually made from Russian oil and what isn't?
Well, I'm really glad you've asked this question, and just give me a second to answer, because I want to say this. And you are absolutely correct. It's enforcement. So General Keith Kellogg, who was appointed as the Ukraine special envoy by Trump, and was given the job of supposedly to negotiate with the Russians until they declared they didn't want to deal with him because he was too pro-Ukrainian. But he said over a month ago, he said, well, if you look at the sanctions, which have already been slapped onto Russia, the sanctions that already exist, they're already signed off. If you look at those, on a scale of 1 to 10, they're about a 6. However, if you look at the enforcement of those sanctions, the pain that they're causing, on a scale of 1 to 10, they're about a 3. So again, this is the age-old question of, gee, if you would just really turn the crank on those embargoes and those sanctions you've already got in place, you could probably do an awful lot of damage without adding any more. But I'm not sure our enforcement mechanisms are up to the task. I've been seeing this for years. I mean, if we were enforcing all these things, the Russians wouldn't have any cruise missiles that they keep firing at Ukrainian cities, because there's a whole pile of American components that are used in the manufacture, the assembly of these things, and every time one of them is partially intact when it lands on the ground in Ukraine and the Ukrainians dissect it, they keep finding American and European components. So something's wrong somewhere with the enforcement mechanism.
Right. Well, clearly that would be the case. They seem to be finding ways, or certainly Putin seems to be finding ways around sanctions. Now I'd like to come to the relationship between President Trump and President Zelensky. Of course, we had the memorable outburst in the White House, the conversation, which was, certainly eyebrow-raising. But things seem to have calmed down. But President Trump was quite aggressive with President Zelensky about the rare earth deal. He said that, if Zelensky were to try and renegotiate that deal, it would be a big, big mistake. What do you read into that sentence, that statement?
I don't think what you're seeing out of Zelensky now, I don't think it has so much to do with the minerals deal, but with some of the other initiatives that have been proposed about America taking over all of Ukraine's power plants and many other sort of strategic facilities. And people are starting to get very nervous that everything could be given away. And they're saying, well, wait a minute, what do we get for this? You're telling us no NATO membership, no boots on the ground. We don't have any guarantee of continued military aid. What's the benefit for us? And I'd be asking the same question if I was him. Trump is obviously at times annoyed with Zelensky. And this goes back all the way to the first Trump term, where Trump was impeached because he was accused of trying to hold up military aid back then. And there's an animosity between the two that I'm not sure is ever going to go away, and that explains part of it.
Okay, well, we shall again wait and see what happens with that. Now, you mentioned, what's Ukraine going to get out of course, this deal, but also in terms of what's Ukraine expecting from Europe. And what about rebuilding once a ceasefire has been arrived at? Security on the ground and so on. So let's switch our attention now, if we may, to Europe and what they're doing. They certainly seem to be stepping up a little bit in terms of defence manufacturing and support of Ukraine. But they're also talking about, certainly the French and the Brits are, talking about putting boots on the ground after a ceasefire has been reached. But they make clear so far that they wouldn't get involved with any kinetic actions. What do you think of that idea?
Well, I'm in favor of boots on the ground because without that, you don't have a lasting peace. The Russians won't stop, regardless of how large the Ukrainian army ends up being and what sort of equipment they have. And particularly France has been talking very seriously about building quite a bit of new military hardware. They just ordered 40 more Rafale fighter aircraft in the last week or so. And they're going to essentially take an old base in the east of France, which had been only a skeleton crew, and it's now going to become a major nuclear base. So Europeans are truly stepping up. But I think the dirty little secret here is that Putin doesn't want a ceasefire, because if the war stops, then his rationale for the way he's been running the country goes away. As long as the war goes on, he's happy, and his people feel that they're part of some great crusade. As soon as the fighting stops, things get much tougher for him. But the Ukrainians don't want a ceasefire now either, because they need time. They need time to rebuild, to take their defense sector and pull it up to a level where they can build 2 or 3 times more the amount of kit that they've been building previously, which wasn't very much. So they need the fighting to continue to give them a breathing space. And it's unfortunate but true. So I don't see that there is in spite of the fact that people are dying and all these horrible things are happening, there's many people that have a vested interest in the fighting continuing.
Well, that doesn't bode very well for President Trump's attempts at gaining a ceasefire and in the long term achieving peace. Just very, very quickly, can Europe do more to support Ukraine? Very quickly, if you would, please, Mr. Johnson.
Yes, Europe can be doing a lot more. I would ask people to watch the YouTube address at the Lucerne dialogue from about a year ago. General Sir Richard Barron lays it all out on the line. It's a very good speech and worth listening to.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure lots of people will look at that. Mr. Reuben F. Johnson, military expert, thank you very much indeed for sharing your analysis with our audience. Have a good day, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye now. And that's all from this episode of World Talks. Goodbye.